a full rebuild barn on a like-for-like basis for use as a residential annex to permit independent occupation at the stables, Ramsden Park Farm, Ramsden Park Road, Ramsden Bellhouse, Billericay, Essex. So I think that's you, Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So the application site relates to a rectangular piece of land which forms part of Ramsden Park Farm. The land comprises an existing building used as an annex ancillary to the main dwelling on the site. The application seeks the removal of condition 3, attached to Planning Permission 09-00165-4, to allow the building to be occupied independently. The main dwelling is located some 108 metres to the west of the annex, with an independent dwelling also located to the west of the annex within Ramsden Park Farm. The site is located at the western end of Ramsden Park Farm, to the west of Church Road in Ramsden Bellhouse, and the site is also located within the Green Belt. So this is just an aerial view of the site. So you can see the main dwelling, which is located to the western, to the left-hand side of the picture, so that's the west of it. And then you've also got an independent dwelling, and then in the middle, which is the grey building here, which is the annex building. And this just shows some photos of the site. So the one on the left is a picture of the front elevation of the annex building, and then the one on the right is to the rear of the building looking west. So just beyond that is the independent dwelling. And then another view looking down the access road with the left photo with the annex building on the left. And then the photo on the right is just beyond that, a bit further down the access road, with the main dwelling on the site just in the distance. And this just shows the access point, and then the front elevation on the right photo with another dwelling just to the east of that. And so this shows the existing site plan for the buildings. So exception H4 of paragraph 154 of the MPPF refers to the reuse of buildings, provided that the buildings are of permanent and substantial construction. The development proposes the reuse of an existing building for residential purposes to be occupied independently from the main dwelling. Given the character and street of the site and the street scene, the annex building gives the appearance as its own residential unit, which forms part of a group of dwellings at this end of Ramsden Park Road and appears separate from the main dwelling. The building is of permanent and substantial construction and is considered to comply with exception H4 of paragraph 154. And then it's just the existing floor plans which remain unchanged, along with the elevations which remain unchanged. So in respect to that, there are also no changes to the existing access or parking arrangements for the site. In terms of RAMS, the site is located within a zone of influence, and as set out in paragraph 6.5.7 within the officer report, it states about a payment being made online. This payment has already been made for clarification in respect of RAMS. And so in conclusion, the application is recommended to members for approval, subject to the conditions identified at the end of the officer report on page 140 and 141 of the agenda pack. Thank you.
You finished now, Thomas? Thank you. Clarifications? Mark?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, the one for me is just, it looks like this was granted in 2009. So what's the difference with this application?
So in 2009, it was granted for the annex building to be built on rebuilt on a. It was proposed for the barn, which is currently still on the site, to be built on a like-for-like basis as an annex building. At the similar sort of time, there was a dwelling, which is this sort of red roofed building. So that's also been approved as an independent dwelling. And then since the grant of planning permission, there was also a new dwelling, which is granted to the east, which is this building just here. So it was a new residential dwelling that was approved there.
Just quickly, Thomas, in the report, obviously one of the conditions is the removal of permitted development rights, and obviously it goes into the legal spiel in the condition, but obviously the reasons about extensions and things like that, but what exact permitted development rights are we removing from this site? I know it just says extensions and things like that, but there are obviously a lot more permitted development rights that are applicable to sites like this. I just wanted a breakdown of exactly what has been curtailed in case they decide to put another planning application in.
Sorry, it's just that condition remains unchanged from the original permission, so it's restricting classes A, B, C, D, and E of Schedule 2, Part 1. So that focuses on extensions to dwelling, sections in the roof, and outbuildings, along with porches, I think it is. That's the...
Will the applicant get informative about that for the future?
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Miles, so it would be a planning condition, so it would go on the decision notice for them.
Any questions? Nope. Right, we'll go straight into the recommendation. That planning application number 2400589 VAR be granted planning permission subject to the conditions set out in the end of the report, with any amendments that might be necessary up to the issues of the decision notice. All those in favour, please show. There's nobody against, no abstentions, so it's granted. Thank you. We will now go into item 6, which is the Felmore's use of 5 to 38 Felmore's Court, Pitsea, from sheltered housing to general needs housing on 5 to 38 Felmore's Court, Felmore's Pitsea, Basildon, Essex. I think that is you, Eunice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So for my application, planning permission is sought for the reuse of sheltered housing at Felmore Court to council housing. The site currently provides 33 sheltered accommodation flats comprising 30 one-bedroom and 3 bedsits. This is an aerial view of the site location. No external changes are proposed to the building, and the building would continue to operate and present as residential development. Here are some site photos of Felmore Court. The top left is of the just viewing the sort of courtyard area in the centre. We also have some site photos from the second floor as well. So the officer recommendation for this application is recommended for grant subject to conditions. That's all. Yep. And are there any questions to this application? Thank you.
Any clarifications on this? Mike?
Thank you, Chair. So, Eunice, can you just talk us through what the parameters are as it stands to be admitted into this, into a unit in this development as sheltered housing? So what parameters do you have to fulfil in order to be permitted to have sheltered housing as it stands?
So for sheltered housing, you would have to be age 55 and above. And
is that it?
That's what, yeah, that is what I'm aware of for sheltered housing.
So just follow-up question. So presumably if we voted in favour of the officer's recommendation for general admission, there'd be no parameters age-wise or such for anyone entering?
That is correct. There would be no age limit, minimum age for anyone to apply for council housing.
Okay. Sorry, and just to clarify then, the proposal is that we would end up with potentially a mix of people in sheltered housing and people in general housing, if I can call it that, living side by side next door to each other in potentially.
Yes, so with the current sheltered housing scheme, according to the 16th of November 2023 accommodation review, current sheltered housing tenants can remain sheltered housing if they so wish, with no changes to their tenure type, or they have the option to switch to general needs tenancy. And the only way that the flat would change into general tenancy would be that if that flat would be vacated. So if the sheltered resident no longer lives there.
Emma?
Thank you, Chair. This is another one for the Officer of the Council, if I may, Chair. My understanding of sheltered housing, the parameters that Councillor Baker was talking about, it was more than just an age limit. It was about them having some kind of support, wraparound support. Some may be vulnerable, and I believe that sheltered housing was to support independence for people who may be vulnerable and have disabilities. So with the move to general housing, would this wraparound support for the sheltered housing residents be removed also? Thank you.
So current sheltered housing residents have the option to stay as sheltered housing if they so wish, and only when their flat is vacated is when that flat would become general housing. So according to the 13th of July 2023 accommodation review, as of March 2023, Basildon Council has around 1,678 sheltered housing units, 15% of its total stock, spread across 44 schemes ranging from 13 to 106 homes each. So the 16th of November 2023 review found that some properties are outdated and hard to fill. But there are several options for existing residents. As I've mentioned before, they have the option to stay as sheltered housing, or they can move to another unaffected scheme with a support package covering removals, utilities, carpets, curtains, and full decoration of the new property.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officer. May I ask if this is something that the council has done before, something that they are familiar with, doing, repurposing sheltered housing to general while some residents remain in the scheme?
This is the first planning application of that sort.
Mike?
Okay. I was looking, I was researching similar schemes earlier, and I did find one in Friends in 2021, which seemed similar, which was about sheltered housing being changed to general. So that's why I asked the question, because that was my understanding that this is something that a similar scheme was approved in 2021 under the previous administration. Is that correct?
I don't know, Councillor Callahan. We'd have to check the planning history of that. It's not a site I'm familiar with.
So just another follow-up question, please, Eunice. So if somebody was admitted on a general admission to this development and exhibited antisocial behaviour, what would the process be to address that? And if the antisocial behaviour persisted on an ongoing basis, how long might the process take before the person was ultimately removed from the development?
So the housing department will follow the council standard protocol for antisocial behaviour. It starts with early intervention warnings, and if the antisocial behaviour continues to escalate, the resident may ultimately be asked to leave. In terms of time framing, it would be a case-by-case basis.
Okay, would it be fair to say that we're talking potentially months of somebody in a general admission flat living next door to somebody who is vulnerable, exhibiting antisocial behaviour?
It's like it's not something we'll be able to answer. That would be something that the housing team would deal with through their normal processes.
Thank you.
Councillor Myers.
Thank you. I think just to clarify the point that Councillor Baker was making, I mean, antisocial behaviour doesn't matter about the type of tenancy that they have. They're still council residents and we still have to follow the same process. I think some of this, obviously, this is a planning decision we have to make. It's not about the housing situation, how it's covered. Whether or not we feel that this is a change which is acceptable to the planning committee to open up some of the sheltered accommodation to general use, obviously that's for us to decide. But obviously, who goes there is down to the housing allocation policy in the future, and that also includes the sheltered scheme people as well. Now, some of the shelter scheme people, they can be offered general housing in this particular location. I've read the report and seen it. Basically, meaning that they pay the same amount of rent, but they no longer have a service charge to pay because they are back into general housing. We don't have that wraparound support, as Councillor Callaghan was saying, but that will be entirely their choice. Now, if they wish to move to another shelter scheme, that is also possible. If they so wish to apply to housing to go elsewhere. In Wickford, I think there's about 5 or 6 shelter schemes near where I am, and there's one in Oakbridge as well, where something similar like this perhaps will be coming up future in planning. So I think it's important to realise that a lot of it is about the housing allocation side of things and not from a planning side of things. And a lot of the plots, flats that are there are currently vacant because a lot of people 55 and above or 60 above, it depends on the scheme, don't necessarily want sheltered housing. They still want independent living. So sometimes it is difficult to fill those. So I suppose it's a way of utilising empty properties across the borough for general needs. And depending on how the allocation system works, that'll be a decision for the housing department to make of who goes in those, and not for us to comment on.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you. I just want to respond to Councillor Myers' point. If this is not strictly a planning policy consideration, if there's considerations around how it will impact residents, especially vulnerable residents, I don't understand why we're discussing this at the planning committee and it's not going to cabinet, for example, because cabinet members have the insight to look at it properly and say this will impact, Pitsea North West residents in a certain way. Absolutely. And I don't think that, picking up on Alex's, Councillor Myers' point, we can't be non-emotional. We can't not have a judgment on this because we're looking at elderly, vulnerable people living next door to people who aren't vulnerable and don't need that support, and we could create a lot of conflict for those people that have been living in sheltered housing for this long. So, I would say, Chair, would it be possible I move that the committee defer consideration of this application for until the Cabinet have reviewed it and discussed it. Yeah, and done a full review on the ramifications of mixing vulnerable residents with non-vulnerable residents. Can I get that seconded by anybody?
I do quite agree with what you're saying, Emma, because you are going to get that. I mean, though they will get the choice to move if they want, a lot of older folks have been living there for a long time, and it means unearthing them. And as you said, you know, antisocial behaviour, you know, they live in a complex where they know that people are more likely to be in line with what they want anyway. So I think it would be a good idea to defer that and bring it to probably housing to let them decide what they want to do. Does anybody else want to speak on it?
Members, can I just get clarity on the reason for the deferral? Is it for the housing department to comment on the application?
I would say Cabinet members.
Cabinet members, yeah.
For the cabinet members. Okay, so we would like a report to be drafted to the relevant cabinet member for housing to review this application and pass back their comments for planning committee members to consider prior to making this application. Okay, that's fine.
I don't want to get it wrong.
Okay, so members, we're now going to put to the vote whether to defer this item in order for the relevant cabinet member to consider the application, pass back their comments on this application. All those in favour of the deferral, please put your hands up. Okay, so that's unanimous, so the matter is now deferred.
Thank you, everybody. Safe journey home.